we met each other about probably 15 or 16 months ago when Philip moved into the village and he became a neighbour of mine. And we decided that the world was in a pretty bad state, and we're both very interested in all types of spirituality things. We've both been involved, not involved, but we've both had this in our hearts pretty much all our lives. So we decided to meditate in a cave. And it was purely for self-worth and self-realization and relaxation, really, from my perspective, more for relaxation, because I couldn't basically deal with what was happening in the world at that particular moment. And when we were meditating, I'd never done this before, but I actually started to speak, and I felt a little bit silly at the time on the basis that I didn't really want to do it, but I was forced to do it. And I spoke a few times during meditations, and then eventually we decided that what was being said was too extraordinary not to be recorded. So we started to record it, and then we had a regular meditation, which is still ongoing now, and we put it into a book. We recorded it. We put it into a transcript, and then we put it into a book because we believe that people could benefit from this. Basically, it is about spirituality. It's about consciousness. It's about what people's interpretation of God is. It's about our life's journey. There is a lot of very interesting information in there regarding the metaphysical world, regarding physics, regarding science, regarding all sorts of things.
But for me, it was completely crazy because I was sitting next to John, and the message we were receiving was the kind of message I studied for many years from Seth and Seth teachings, and the information was of the same nature as the Seth teachings. So it was unbelievable for me.
I wasn't acquainted with Seth at all. I'd never even heard of Seth.
The first messages were about what we really are, and we are only energy. It seems to be maybe elusive, but after that it came into details, and quite precise details. And
he never exposed himself with a name, and he never calls us a name because he says we're all energy. And the basis of energy is working on emotions. He doesn't particularly like language. He likes frequency and vibration and emotions. But there is a defined philosophy within what we call the sessions. You could read one session, you could flip to, there's 52 sessions in the book, in the first book. You could flip to session 25, and you could get real meaning out of that. If you read from session 1 to session 52 in order, then you will see it develops with the philosophy of life, and he's explaining to us what we are, why we're here, and what life is all about. So, I mean, basically, it's a question that I've asked myself all my life, and I'm sitting there and I'm getting the answers. So, and the answers are very precise, and it's very accurate. So, it's a very, very interesting journey. It was a fascinating journey. We spent the first probably 4 or 5 sessions, or probably more, attempting to prove it, because we were totally gobsmacked with the information that we were receiving, that we really were trying to prove whether that information was real or not. And one of the things that we did to prove it was I think in session 4, I asked Philip to ask a question mentally in his head, and not tell me. And the question was, do you know Seth? And it's the only time he ever answered. It's the only time he ever said a name was during the session. He said, "Yes, I do know Seth." And then in the session, he referred to Seth again. But that's the only time he's ever in, I think we're probably 80 sessions now, referred to a specific name, because he doesn't like names, because he said that our egos will create a story around a name. So he doesn't use names. And this was the only time he used a name. So it was fascinating because of what, as the philosophy develops in the second book that we're going to put out there, volume 2, it's absolutely fascinating because it gets more complex, and it's not really complex in terms of it's said in a way. He says many times that he will say it in a different way until we understand it. And in book 2, he certainly does that. And he explains the metaphysical, he explains what energy is, he explains how it's formed, he explains what we are in relative to that. He explains that there's no such thing as time, it's an illusion. And I mean, we do have continually a hell of a job to get our heads around the philosophy, but we do seem to be progressing on the basis of that philosophy and being able to understand it more and more. And we believe that the experience is so radical and so dynamic that we think there would be something in there for anybody to actually not learn, but as he says, remember, because we are all one, and we're all the same form of energy. So this information is accessible to all of us. It's already within our brain as a knowledge, and it's our responsibility to release that and to understand it. And he also says that other people in our time-created illusion are not at a position where they can understand it, and neither will they understand it, but they will get something from it, even if it begins an awakening for them, you know. And there's many words in there that we didn't really, well, I didn't relate to. I came from a mediocre sort of Christian background originally, so I know the basic teachings of Christianity. And he referred to God constantly as a source, or source energy. And I struggled to get my head around that, on the basis that I hadn't been brought up in the world, and I certainly, although I've always, I think we all have had certain instinctive abilities. I've sort of hidden them most of my life, and I didn't really want to think for people to think I was a total nutcase. Because I've been in the commercial sector and been quite successful in that, in the technology. But for me, it was extraordinary. And if it's extraordinary, then maybe it should be shared. Maybe it should. I don't really know. We decided to record it, and we decided to put it out there. And if people want to read it, they can. And if they don't have to. But we believe that there's something in there for anybody who is on a quest to understand the meaning of life. It's also simplistic in a lot of ways, because he does tell us there's no necessity for us to understand quantum physics. There's no necessity for us to understand the technicalities of science. I find it incredibly interesting on a very basic level. But he says there's no necessity for us to understand it, because we all inertly have this knowledge anyway. The most important thing for us to understand is what we are, why we're here, and what our purpose is. And according to him, our purpose is to join once again with the source energy, which is the one created energy. I suppose if there was a mainstream, the word mainstream, if there was a religion that you could come close to, which is the words that we're being told in the cave, it would be the Buddhist religion. But I don't know about that really in reality, but there seems to be a lot of similarities to Buddhism as to what is spoken in the cave. I mean, I had a big problem with it at the beginning on the basis that I didn't. The reason I knew it was real is that I couldn't possibly come out personally for 25 minutes or 30 minutes with such precise information with never a flaw. I mean, as I'm speaking now, I sort of stop and I get the wrong words and I have to think about what I'm saying. Well, in there is no pause. There's no word out of place. There's no. It's crystal clear, you know, and it's quite fascinating.
We had to find a name because it's just useful to call him with a name. So the man in the cave came naturally.
We don't know, or I don't believe the energy is masculine or feminine. I believe it is an energy talking from what is a different dimension of consciousness. It could even be our higher selves, because we are told that we are living many lives in many dimensions in one moment. So we could even be talking to our higher self. We don't really know.
One interesting thing, he said that it's not the first time that John and I are meditating in this cave. It means in other lives we did the same. Maybe it's an explanation why we've been both attracted to this place, because he's an Englishman, very far from his basis. And I'm not from here, I'm from Bordeaux, 200 kilometers from here. And we have been attracted to this place, and by a very strong energy. So I understand that we could have lived the same experience in another life. It's an old cave which had been in the past studied by the archaeologists from Bordeaux. They studied it many years because they studied the interaction between the animals and the men. So they discovered many things in this cave, but I'm sure they didn't realize that this cave had was a kind of portal for communication. I tried to make an experiment, and I wanted to prove that with my mind I can control the matter. Because in the cave, he keeps repeating that, and when we are together, we can achieve everything we want to. So I decided to make an experiment, and this was to try to bend a fork just with my brain. So many times I went, I was alone. I went into the cave to meditate with my fork, and nothing happened. And one day we meditated together, and I laid the fork on my table. And when we came out of the cave, we saw the fork bend.
Well, we saw the fork bend in front of our eyes on the table. I know that sounds, I mean, I suppose it's energy. I didn't see the relevance from Philippe wanting to create gold or bend the fork, because for me, there was no relevance for that in our life. But we were constantly trying to look for proof. And we're having the discussion because we discuss many things when we come out of the cave. Often we don't actually remember. I don't remember what's being said in there until it's typed up. But we do have many discussions, and we sat around the table and the fork bent in front of our eyes. So that was rather bizarre. But I think that was more a case of proof for Philippe. Because I had no great desire to bend forks. I think Uri Geller has done it for years, but he didn't really, it wasn't anything that was in my mind. But I think Philippe was quite frustrated at the time because we were being told that we're living many lives in one time and nothing that we can think of is impossible. And I think Philippe applied that to his conditioned life here and thought, well, I can do that. And for me, it was just another form of proof that what we were experiencing was real.
He said that we are living many lives in the same time. And the difference with the Buddhists, the Buddhists think that there is a reincarnational, the cause and the effect. But in fact, everything happens in the moment. So we are in this moment living many different lives. In some lives, we are men. In other lives, we are women. In some, we are white. We are black. We are poor, rich, and all these lives are made to complete the experience in order for us to understand more in very different situations and circumstances. But he said in the cave that all these different lives are not important. The context is not important. What is important is in each context, trying to experience and become aware. But the nature of the experience is not so important.
He often talks, this is an interesting subject, he often talks about it's experience, it's not a lesson, it's experience. Now there's a vast defined feeling about a lesson and an experience. A lesson you feel you've got to learn, a lesson you feel that you're going to be punished if you don't learn, or it's going to be less beneficial in your life if you don't learn it. An experience is a completely different thing. An experience is something you go through, whether it's good or bad, and we're told there is no good or bad, it doesn't exist. And that then reflects back on Christian religion, teachings of Jesus, forgive, no, don't judge, no good, bad. It's literally an experience, and it's not for us to judge others, because if we judge others, we're judging ourselves, and ultimately that's one. So there is a huge amount of information within the Man in the Cave sessions, and there's a huge amount of information coming through now, which is quite incredible. But all we're doing on a personal level is experiencing what we're experiencing in the cave, putting it into a transcript. It's raw. We would not allow a publishing company to change the words in any way. What you read there and what you hear, if you download a transcript and you listen to an audio on the website, it's written exactly as it is spoken.
When the Man in the Cave speaks through John's mouth, everything is so clear. It's crystal clear. It's incredible. I'm not a native speaker, you can see, but everything makes perfect sense. I understand everything. That's so clear. And when you hear the audio files, even if the audio quality, and I explain why it's not so good, but you can feel the emotion behind the words, and I think it's really important to hear the message. Why is the world changing so much now? It's because we are raising the vibrational energy. And we do that in staying in the positive. That's why the message is important. It is important. And the awakening that is occurring now is because we are.
Well, because we've lived in fear, I think, for a few years, and when you live in fear, you start to ask questions. The biggest fear we've had in the last few years is the fear of death, which, of course, is the biggest fear you can have through pandemics and things like that. And we're constantly living in a world of fear, and that fear is awakening people. So they start to ask questions, and when you start to ask questions with sincerity, you get answers. Yeah, positive energy, positive thoughts, love, all-encompassing love, not the love that you think about when towards your wife or your car or your dog, but the all-encompassing love that brings us together as one.
And we are creating the world. We are creating the world we live in. So we have to be aware of what we have in our heads, because we are creating the future now.